Thank you, Claude, for agreeing to join me for this Zoom interview during these pandemic times. And thank you for writing this book. How many of us have wondered what it was like for you all these years? And here we are coming up in December for the 75th anniversary of the premiere of the movie. Mm-hmm. And people are still talking about it, coming in droves to see Marjorie Rawlings' home, walking the Yearling Trail, which I just did last week in the forest in the scrub. I want to start with what inspired you to finally write that book after all these years?
Well, I had always had in the back of my mind doing something like that. Also, I reached a point where I retired and I had time, and I thought, well, this would be an opportunity to reflect on things. And I did realize that the years that I spent at MGM were very unique. I mean, it was like the end of an era, and to be there and see it was very captivating. And as I spent time each day, I had more or less total recall. I remembered so many things, whether or not it was the guy who gave me the books every week at the bookstore at MGM, who wouldn't let me pay for anything, to walking by the barbershop and seeing Van Johnson getting his shave in the morning. I mean, there were just a lot of things that I remembered that I thought people would be interested in. And it took me a year to do it, but it was...
Did your kids inspire you to do it? Did they say, Dad, write this book?
Well, yeah, in fact, my wife had said, this would be a great opportunity for you to tell your children what kind of life you've had. And that, in a way, inspired me also, because they never knew, really, because they weren't there during that early part. So it did give me an opportunity to do that. And it was fun, it was rewarding. And what's interesting to me is I still get every day photos and mail from people primarily in Europe. I get a lot of things from Germany, get a lot of things from England, and they're interested in the book. They have photos that they send me to autograph and send back to them, and they're always self-addressed, and it's very heartwarming to read some of their letters, that I've had an impact, that the movies that I had, particularly The Yearling, but also Rio Grande and a couple of other films.
Right, you did another 10 films after you did The Yearling, correct?
In fact, there were a couple of things that I was talking about. I remember Burt Reynolds, who's obviously a Florida guy down there, heard him talk on TV a couple of times about The Yearling. Seeing that film inspired him to go into acting.
Really?
Yeah, and he talked about that a couple of times. So, things like that have made an impact. And anytime I see somebody either in the movie business or out of the movie business, they say, oh, God, yeah, well, they know the year, they remember me from that. So the movies that I did make between Rio Grande, The Yearling, and True to the Dust have some lasting value, and people still remember one of the three films. And that's kind of where I made a decision to do the book, and thought it was that it was important for my kids and for me, self-satisfaction to do that. People say, why don't you do another one? I don't know if I could do another one.
Well, I know you said in your book that you hadn't read The Yearling at the time. You were only, 10 years old, maybe younger, when they looked for you and found you.
Donna, I brought some pictures I want to show you.
Okay.
I think you can see, okay?
Look at that. Look at that. Now, how old were you? 8, 9, 10?
No, I was 10 years old. This was the picture that Clarence Brown took when he came to my house the afternoon he saw me. And this is a picture that he took and sent back to MGM and said, this is who I think would be the best Jody for this.
It looks so much like the sketches that N.C. Wyeth did for the book.
I was a homely little kid. Okay. Then I had a couple. This is a picture with Gregory Peck when we were doing wardrobes fittings before starting the movie.
Wow.
That's when I'd first met him.
Now, did you know who he was when you
Not
met him?
really.
Not really?
He was not a famous person at that time. He'd made a couple of pictures, but he wasn't. He was just beginning to take off. This is another picture, which
Oh, look at that. Oh, look at that. You are reading The Yearling.
so there you are, right there.
Oh, you know, I didn't live in Florida when I first read the book, and it's amazing to me, before even seeing the movie, the tears that story brings. And then to now be talking to you, who had to bring that story to life on film as your first acting job, and the tears you had to come up with so many times working with Clarence Brown. How did you do that?
It wasn't easy, believe me. This is a picture of with Gregory Peck and Jane Wyman, and that's
What a great photo.
mother, father, and son. I have all these pictures, so I'll just show you a couple more, and then we'll move on. It's a picture with Jane.
That must have been after the snake bite.
Yeah, who absolutely was a wonderful person to deal with. And then this is one more.
Oh, look at that.
And then this one you will enjoy because this is Fodder Wing.
Oh, look at there.
That was Don Gift, who was a young boy.
Now, was that in California when you did the scenes with him, or did you do some of the scenes with Fodder Wing in Florida?
No, all the scenes with him were at the studio.
In California. Did you get to see the picture I sent to you of the actual Fodder Wing?
I did. That's pretty interesting. Yeah.
It's pretty amazing.
The Fodder Wing in the movie, his name was Don Gift. And he had showed up at MGM and said he wanted to try out for my role. And Clarence Brown saw him and he said, "That's Fodder Wing. That's fine." Because he's a very anemic little, he actually was that way. I mean, I think he was 20 years old.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
You've never known that. Wow.
So he had some growing up issues and everything, but he was wonderful in it. God, he was great.
Did you stay good friends with him after the movie?
Not really. He kind of disappeared. I think he moved back east somewhere. And I did not later on hear from him.
I want to back up for a minute to the shocking number I saw in your book where you said about 19,000 boys had tried for that role. 10,000 in one spot, and then there were another 9,000, and then you ended up them finding you. That is just amazing.
Well, I don't think there were actually, I think there were a lot of those were photographs that were sent in. I don't think there were actually 19,000 actual.
Tried out, but sent their pictures then.
Yeah, but there were a lot because before Clarence Brown took over the scouting, the scouting people from MGM went out from the studio, and they would go into a city like Houston, for example, and they would run an ad saying, "We're looking for someone to play this young boy in The Yearling, and if you have a 10-year-old young boy that might be interested, come to the hotel, Saturday morning." Well, everybody, whether they were 5 or 25, showed up. So So they just felt that that system wasn't going to work. And that's when Clarence Brown said, I will take on the search. And that's when he would go into these schools and he would go into the Board of Education in a city and tell them who he was and say, I just want to go look in your schoolroom. If I see somebody I like, I'll talk to him. If I don't, I'll leave. Nobody knew that I was even there. And that's how he would do that. And he came to Nashville on a Friday afternoon and looked in the schoolroom and saw me and talked to me. And so it was all on looks. He looked like, I looked like what he was looking for.
And then you had the whole package. You could memorize those lines. You could have evoked emotions. You had so many qualities that they were looking for. And you really had a lot of respect for Mr. Brown. As I read your book, you talked so much about his ability to work with you, getting you ready for the next day and just talking you through it, right?
Yeah, he was committed. And, it took, the time I started, the time I finished, it was over a year. So it took a long time to make and finish that movie. So there were a lot of days, a lot of times.
What did you think of, I know what you're going to say, but you were here during some of the hottest months of the year in the 1940s. Tell us a little bit about what it was like on a daily basis for you working here in Florida.
Well, we actually got rained out. We started in April and we left at the end of August. And it was steaming hot, no question about it. And I don't think there was much air conditioning around during those days either. So we were staying at this little motel in Silver Springs and, going out and waiting around a lot. And then on the rain, it would rain for a week and we couldn't do anything. So we're sitting in a car just waiting. And if you got a little break of 10 minutes, come on, let's go, let's get this shot. So it was very hard. It was an extremely difficult movie to make. I made 11 films, nothing compared to that. Nothing.
Because Clarence Brown was such a perfectionist. Is that why?
He was. He kept saying, this horrible saying that we laughed about. You would do a scene and you know that it was really, you couldn't do it any better. And everyone would, Gregory Peck, we would all say that, God, that was good. He said, hey, that's great. Cut it and print it now. Once more for Paris. For Paris? Yeah, that was the thing. Once more for Paris.
Oh, my goodness. Do you remember Bobby Randall, who played your double? There were some pictures of the two of you together, and he was so proud of that in his life. He went on to do other things, but he was so proud to have gotten that role as such a East Marion County boy.
Is that right?
Yeah.
Well, I'm sure there were a lot of scenes where there were a lot of running scenes that he probably did that I didn't do, because I had left in August ago, and then we finished the film at the studio, and then in January I came back because we had some finish up scenes, and they were all like running and doing all the other scenes that made out the rest of the film.
There were quite a few people who are still around who are relatives of folks who had to maintain the set, helped with the corn that would be in cans at the different levels that they had to put in the garden for the scenes of the corn in the fields. And I talked to a woman whose brother-in-law caught 10 of those deer for the movie. And I'm wondering, I don't know if the one you love the most, the little Bambi that you named Bambi, if he got that one, but he got 10 of the deer that were used at the different age groups.
I've often wondered about how they got those deer.
He had a whole tracking system where he could see the size of the mother's hooves and then the size of the deer, and just he knew the circumference of where to look. It's pretty amazing little ability. But tell us of what it was like for you working with animals. How did that?
It's funny because the deer, I would say we probably used maybe four, in some different scenes or whatever. But the one that I spent most time with was little Bambi. Everyone had a name. Bambi, Nina, we had all these.
Oh,
Jughead was one of them. And Bambi was the only one who literally would fold up his legs and would sit in your lap for hours. Most deer, they don't like their legs folded. They want their legs down where they can bolt if they need to. So all the deer, I would say every one of them always wanted their leg, insisted that their legs be spread out, straightened out, except this one, and would sit there. And this deer followed all the way through the film. And when we did a tour to New York and Chicago for a promotion after the film was being released, and we took a deer with us. That was the deer we took with us. And that was Bambi, and Bambi was already almost a year and a half old.
did you have to spend time with them each day so that they would know you? Not really?
Not really.
Now, everybody's going to want to know about the bear hunt. That was pretty scary from what I understand from some of the other people who were around filming that. How was it for you?
Well, it was interesting because I'm not sure I know all the everything that went into it, but as I understand it, they got the bear from maybe a zoo, and the bear was not prepared to fight, but those dogs were prepared to fight. The dogs attacked the bear, there were two dogs, and they were I don't know, bear dogs. I mean, they right after right after the bear. And so they could only film, they had probably 3 or 4 cameras at the same time. And they turned the dogs loose. Today, I don't think you can do that, frankly.
Probably not.
I don't think so.
So many questions.
Nobody got hurt, so it worked out okay.
That's good. That's good. So many questions. Try to get as many in as I can that people want to know. Now, your dad, he came with you, correct, during the filming, and must have been an interesting time for him, but also, I can't imagine, what was he doing during all the time you were filming and working?
Well, what was interesting was that before we went on this adventure, my dad was during the war. He had 2 jobs. I rarely saw him. He was working during the day, and then he was working, making tents or something at night. So he was working. So this gave an opportunity to really get to know him. And he went with me everywhere till I was about 15. And so there was always something to do. My dad, he was not somebody who was enamored of Hollywood. His friends were all the grips, the electricians, the people who, the common people who worked. Those were his friends. And so it was great for him to have that opportunity, because the guy had worked so hard coming up into that, because he'd just been laboring 7 days a week. And so it was a great opportunity for him, which was terrific. And we got to spend a lot of time together, which was really rewarding.
He probably enjoyed getting to know Gregory Peck as well, and James.
Absolutely. Gregory Peck and I spent a lot of time together. I think anytime he was in a scene, I was in a scene. So we were always together. Not so much with Jane Wyman, but with him, it was we were buddies, and he had just made a couple of films where he was becoming. I think he was only, what, 29. He was in his 20s,
Wow.
and
It was before To Kill a Mockingbird, so he
that was
was,
later. Of course,
yeah, that came later.
yeah. But he started. He made a lot of Duel in the Sun. He made a lot of movies afterwards. Spellbound, Gentleman's Agreement. He became a big movie star, and The Yearling was probably the one of the ones that really set him off. But he was wonderful to be with. Very, very patient. How can you not be patient with somebody who's you're dealing with animals who you have no control over, and dealing with kids, a kid who never made a movie before, who's finding his way. So, but he was great.
So, how did you learn to have the emotions to be able to, in your first film like that as a young boy, be able to know how to cry? And can you share with us was that a Clarence Brown working with you? Who got you to really know how to do that?
I think a lot of it, I say it's me, because I got so involved in that movie.
You felt the part, basically. You're saying you really felt the part.
I became that little boy, and it was, there's no other way to do it except when you get involved in it, then you're able to do it. And fortunately, we had done a lot of other things before we got into the crying part. In fact, we were almost ready. We'd almost been working 3 months. And so it was then, the first thing I did crying was when I shot it. I shot the deer. And that was amazing. Okay.
When your children, I assume your children have seen the movie.
Yes.
Did they have the same reaction, do you think, that the general public had? Did they fall in love with it the same way the rest of the world has fallen in love with it?
I don't know. They've seen it, and they've moved on to other things. So.
Well, I knew one thing I wanted to say to you is that, if you win one Pulitzer Prize in your life, if you win one Oscar in your life, that in itself is a lifelong achievement that who cares if you ever win anything again? That role that you had, you are forever going to be a part of people's just love for a role that's just endearing. No matter whatever else you ever made, that role in the world's eyes was just so beautifully done.
Well, Donna, what you have in that picture, you have a role that actors would die for. I mean, how many pictures do you see where someone is in every scene in the picture? Maybe there's one cutaway or something. So actors die for those kind of roles, So I had that role. I never had it again. And a lot of people never even come close to it. But it was there. It embraced me. I was able to get inside of it. I went around barefooted. When we went back to California from Florida in August of 1945, I put shoes on. I couldn't keep them on. I'm on the train and my feet are so hot, I had to walk around barefooted. Because I'd been barefooted for like 4 months. And just calluses on my feet. So, I mean, that was me. My hair was, no one had hair like that, like they do today. But in those days, my hair was down shoulder length, and that's just the way it was, you know.
Well, I know that you ended up in some other movies, some that you especially talked about that were so proud, that you were very proud of. But yet, at the same time, you looked at Hollywood with very real eyes, and you seem to get that the whole fantasy world was not necessarily going to be for you for your whole life. You went back to college, you went in the Navy, you then became head of that film festival in San Francisco. That was very, trying to think of what the right word is, you know, how you would have such intuition to not let it swallow you up, I guess is what I'm trying to say.
Well, I never liked being the notoriety. I mean, even in those days, there were movie fans were like they are today. You know, they're saying they're crazy today. They were crazy then. You know, it was, and I liked my privacy. I'd walk down past the studio a lot in the morning, and these kids would be across the street. Hey, are you somebody? I said, no, I'm not anybody. I just keep walking. So I don't, you've got to have the ego. It has to be there, because what you're selling is yourself. And I was able to do that when I was at MGM, because MGM did it for you. You know, you won a contract at MGM, they found your pictures, and you went to work and you made them. And, you know, it was after that I made a couple of other films. Rio Grande I made with John Ford and John Wayne. But a lot of the other things, they weren't not anything special. But
I know you loved Intruder in the Dust. You were very
Intruder in the Dust, I thought it was a very important film. It's interesting because today it's still a film that has great notoriety. It's on every year on Turner Film. I was at the Turner Film Festival. I went down there and showed it, and they had such demand they showed it twice. So it's a film that is current. It was very interesting. It was Clarence Brown again, and it was made in Oxford, Mississippi, and it was made in its entirety in Oxford, Mississippi. So we were using a lot of the local people there. And of course, William Faulkner was still alive, and he was on the set. You know, we spent a lot of time. I used to go to his house on weekends because his daughter was the same age. She'd have parties and things. But to me, that was a very important film, and it shows again. There's always a film noir series around, and Intruder is one that is important.
very timely in today's world right now with what's been happening.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Well, again, we should tell people the name of your book. I'll hold it up again. You can see I've marked a lot of pages that I found interesting. But My Life in the Final Days of Hollywood. You did have a chance to meet, you know, some Elizabeth Taylor and Natalie Wood and Donna Reed and all those folks. That picture with the 25th anniversary of MGM was pretty fascinating too. I wonder how many are still alive from that photo. There were like 3 or 4 I saw on a blog that you did. Do you know if that's still true today? If there's still 3 or 4 of you still alive?
Still alive?
Yeah. That are still alive that were in that 25th anniversary MGM?
Maybe 3 people.
Maybe 3 people.
I'm one. I think is Arlene Dahl, maybe. There's a couple of other people.
Can't remember if Angela Lansbury is still alive.
Still, yeah. That's probably maybe 4.
Yeah.
But that showed exactly what was going on at MGM those days, between Clark Gable, Ava Gardner, Spencer Tracy, Frank Sinatra, Elizabeth Taylor, had them all, had them all, and we all were working, and it was a wonderful time. As Jackie said, that was a time that it'll never happen again.
No, you definitely had lived in two worlds of the movies. From those days to what's happening right now. I don't know what you are enjoying doing the most in your retirement, because you certainly kept busy with that film festival in San Francisco. So how do you spend your time now?
15 years I was in charge there, and that was a great opportunity because we do these tributes where we would bring in actors and directors and show films of their retrace their career, actually, and then have them on stage to talk about it. And those were wonderful opportunities. And the fact that we were in San Francisco and it was only an hour to Los Angeles, they would be flying up and do it. So it was the only one who I did not invite and did not want to come was Clarence Brown, because I thought that would have been, people would say, why did you not have him there? Although I would have loved to have had him. But we did have John Ford, and we had, people like that. So it was great.
I'm glad you finally got one of the larger Oscar statues, too. I had no idea they only gave you those little mini ones at first.
I still have both of them.
Yeah, you certainly deserved.
I said, do you want the little one back? They said, no, you keep it. I said, it's very valuable. They said, that's all right. It's all yours.
Wow. Well, is there anything you would like to share with those of us who are big fans of Marjorie Kinnan Rawlings, who have loved you in The Yearling, or just that I haven't asked you that you were hoping to share today?
Well, if let's put it this way, if it hadn't been for Marjorie Rawlings, I would probably still be living in Nashville, Tennessee, because it was her writing that book that enabled the opportunity for me to change my life, no question about it. And having the opportunity to do what I've done throughout my life, I would go back and wouldn't change anything. It's been a great experience, and The Yearling is still a very important part of my life. I could probably, in another, give me a day, I could probably recite the whole film. You
did have a quote in there when you got mad at your parents that you said that you could still remember. Can you do it now?
I literally could. I knew the other roles too. I knew Gregory Peck's role. I knew my role.
Oh my gosh!
When I was 12, your mind is just a sieve. You just think about everything. So.
I think every parent just cringes when they think of, what you had to say to them when they made you shoot that deer, and you said you could still quote that about "I hate you" and
hate you. I hope to die. I hope I never see you again.
Oh, what parent wants to hear that? Oh no! Wow.
On purpose, you always hated him.
Oh my goodness.
Anyway, Donna, it's been fun. I love to reminisce. I love the fact that that you're doing these things for Ms. Rawlings. I think she's somebody who people will never forget, and I think she's made a name for herself, rightly so. And I'm just proud that I was kind of being a part of what she's achieved.